In chapter 1, we spent a lot of time, and we ended up looking at how Jesus gathered his 5 disciples together. I only want to call your attention to one verse in chapter 1 before we start in chapter 2. I want you to look down in verse, get over there, 43. And in verse 43, in the middle of his gathering these disciples, it says, "On the morrow he was minded to go forth into Galilee." So now, Jesus is getting ready to go up into Galilee. That's all I want us to see. He's getting ready to change his position. Now, if we will look at the map that I just put up here, here we see that in 143, he's getting ready to go. Now, I think I've got this on automatic right here, so if it starts out right there. So Jesus now has got these 5 disciples. There's the Jordan River. There is where Bethany is, and notice I'm moving Bethany down there. Now you say, why are you doing that? Because we don't know where it was. It might have been up north, it might have been south. But at any rate, he has gathered his 5 disciples together, and now he's going to go up to Nazareth. So that sets the stage for us to begin in chapter 2. He goes back up into Galilee, and Nazareth is in Galilee up there. And so when he gets up there, why, it says in chapter 2, verse 1, "And the 3rd day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee." So now here it is as we start in chapter 2. We look here in verse 1, why we see that there was a marriage or a wedding that was up there in Cana. Now there's where Cana would be, about 4.5 miles north of Nazareth. When it says that on the 3rd day, he's going, John is taking it, and on the morrow, and on the morrow, and then on the 3rd day. So evidently that is the 3rd day after he called Nathanael. And keep in mind that Nathanael is from Cana himself. We learned that over in John chapter 21 and in verse 2. He tells us that he was there. So now, this morning, we're going to study about Jesus' first miracle that he ever did, and it's going to be up here in Cana of Galilee. It said, "And the mother of Jesus was there, and Jesus also was bidden, and his disciples to the marriage." So now, Jesus and his 5 disciples, remember at this time, he doesn't have all of them called yet. He's got these 5, and he's not told them that they're going to be disciples. They're just followers of him. They're just following him around at this particular time. But they were all invited to this marriage feast that was up there. "And when the wine failed, the mother of Jesus said unto him, They have no wine. And Jesus saith unto her, Woman, or lady, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come." What Jesus actually says is, what is that to you or me? Now Mary comes and tells him they have no wine. There's a whole lot of suppositions we can put in here. Why would she have come to him and said they have no wine? Well, people say evidently she was a hostess. Evidently these people had hired her to wait as a waitress at this wedding feast, because she's concerned about them running out of this. It sounds that way, probably so. We really don't know. But it's interesting that she came to Jesus and she said, they have no wine. Now, when you say about they have no wine, I put 2 goat skins up there. What they had in those days, instead of having bottles, they had their wine in goat skins. They would take a goat skin, they would tie off the legs and so forth, and then take the neck of it and put their wine in there, and that's what they would carry their wine in. And they did this for a good reason. One of the reasons is, as it fermented and it expanded, why the goat skin would go out and expand with it. But they had this wine. Now, we don't know how much wine they had. We don't know how big the wedding feast was. So as we're looking at this, we can put a lot of things in there. It's awfully easy for me to think, okay, a wedding feast, that's a great big thing. They had 300 or 400 people there. Oh, not necessarily. They might have had 20 people there. Just the people, the close friends, and the family, or something of that nature. So we don't know how big the party was, and we really don't know what Mary was doing there, but she probably was there, since she came and said this, in some official capacity. But the interesting thing is, she came to him and said, they don't have any wine. He looked up and he said, well, what is that to you or me? Now, this is just a normal thing. Let's suppose we're all up at Rod's house, and they run out of coffee. And Helen comes in and says, Lowell, they don't have any coffee. Well, I'd probably say the same thing. I'd say, well, so what? In other words, it's not my problem, and it's not your problem. What? So what? And so that really is what he's saying. He's saying, what is that to you or to me? Now then, she turned around and she said something at that time. Now, he said, well, before that, right here, we'll have to put an order right here. He said something about, he tells her, what is that to you or me? My hour is not yet come. So Jesus saith unto her, what is that to you or me? Mine hour is not yet come. What does that mean? Mine hour is not yet come. Again, we can get the wrong idea. And we can think that's talking about his crucifixion or some big thing. What that terminology means is it's not the right time for an event. In other words, there is a time I'm going to do something, but it's not the right time right now. It would be kind of like if I'm at Rod's party and I'm going to do something. I'm going to pull a joke. So I've got my stuff here ready, and at the right time I'm getting ready to pull a joke, try to liven up the party. Helen comes in and said, Lowell, do you want to do something right here to liven up the party? And I look at her and I say, what I'd say today is, no, not yet. Leave me alone. In other words, I'm going to do it at the right time. Jesus said, my hour is not yet come. That's all that means. It's not the time for me to do what I'm getting ready to do. Now, it raises the question again, did Mary know he's getting ready to perform a miracle? Did she have any idea? Had they ever talked about this? As he grew up and she talked to him, how much had she said about his deity and what had he told her? And we don't know these things. This is what drives us crazy, and it shows that the Bible is divine. A human being would have written 1,000 pages on what Jesus and Mary had said one to another, because they both knew that he was divine. And so here it is, we just have this, and so he said, my hour is not yet come. In other words, what he's telling her is, leave me alone, it's not time for me to do anything. Now the interesting thing is, again, then she looked around at the servants and she said, whatsoever he saith unto you, you do it. So now, as said, whatever he says to you, you do it, is kind of interesting to me. This, again, I think shows us that she was there in some official capacity. She looked at the servants, and she turned around, and Jesus said, my hour is not yet come. In other words, I'm not going to do anything. She looks at him and said, whatever he tells you, you do it. Did she know what he was going to do? There's no indication she did. No, none whatsoever. It would show, though, that she does have a confidence in him that he's going to do something. let's go back at the coffee. We're up there at Rod and Denise's, and they're having a party. Helen comes in and says, Lowell, Denise is out of coffee. I said, well, what's that to us? And so I said, it nothing there. She turns around to the people who are serving, and she said, whatever Lowell says you do, and walks away. Now, it would show that she had some confidence that I was going to do something, see? And she had confidence in him, he was going to do something. But there's no indication yet that she had any idea that he's getting ready to perform a miracle. So now, it tells us that there were 6 water pots, 2 or 3 firkins each. Now, that tells us, the scholars tell us, that each one of these containers carried about 25 gallons. So if you had 6 of them there, you're going to have, 150 gallons of water that's there. Now, these water pots would be there to wash in. They were very meticulous. When the Jews went anywhere and did anything, they'd come around and then they would wash their hands. And here are all these water pots that are out there, and they're used, nobody ever used a water pot to put wine in, is the point I'm making. They had wine in wine skins. They had these water pots out there, and they had them out there to wash and for cleansing that's there. So now, she tells these people, you do whatever he says to do. And he saith unto them, in verse 7, and Jesus saith unto them, fill the water pots with water. And they filled them up to the brim. Now again, did they have water in them? Yeah, I suppose. That's what they were out there for. Did he tell them, rinse them out and sterilize them? No. He said, fill them up to the brim. So people had been washing their hands in this water. Did they just go ahead and put more water in it and fill it up to the brim, or did they pour the water out? Well, what it seems to me is they just filled it up to the brim. That's what they did. Now one might say, boy, I wouldn't want to drink after that. Well, you would if there's a miracle going to be involved. That's what Jesus did. He's changing the whole thing. You're not going to be worrying about that kind of stuff that's there. So he told them, fill it up, and so they filled it up right to the very brim. And he saith unto them, draw out now, and bear unto the ruler of the feast, and they bear it. So as soon as they filled these pots up with water, he said, now, draw some of this out and take it to the ruler of the feast. Now, the ruler of the feast would be somewhat, I guess, kind of akin to what we'd call a bridegroom today. That is, it would be somebody who is taking charge of the wedding feast so the groom doesn't have to do it. The groom is going to be the one that's paying for the whole thing and in charge of the whole thing. But one of his friends he would choose to oversee the wedding feast so he could give his attention to the party and the honor that he's being received. So he took it to this ruler that is there, that is in charge of all of this, and bare it. And when the ruler of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and knew not whence it was that the servants had drawn the water, it said, but the servants knew in there. The ruler of the feast called unto the bridegroom, and saith unto him, every man setteth on first the good wine, and then when men have drunk freely, then that which is worse. Thou hast kept the good wine until now. So the ruler is shocked. He's shocked because he tastes this wine, and it's the real good stuff. It's good. It tastes good. He can tell it's quality wine. And so he goes into the bridegroom, and he's shocked. What have you done? Here it is. You put on the bad wine to start with, and now then, when people have their taste buds all sodden and they've been drinking for a long period of time and so forth, and now then you put on the good wine. No, nobody ever does that. It would be something like, if you say, well, I'm not a wine drinker, let's take a cake eater. I think we all eat cake and cookies. Suppose you go in and you have some cookies in there. Well, after you've eaten, a dozen cookies or 2 dozen cookies, your palate is kind of filled up. The taste is not there. That first taste that you have of that cookie is great. And later, it dies down and it dies down. So a good cook, she would take the best cookies and put it out, and then later on in the party, she would put out those cookies that doesn't look so good or doesn't taste so good. That's what it is. That's what they did with the wine. So he just shocked. In other words, it's such a big difference that he is just absolutely shocked. And he goes to this guy and said, "What have you done?" And he had no idea what had gone on. Now, that's where the story ends. This beginning of the signs did Jesus in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed on him. So he just left it there. What did everybody say in the party? I don't know. As you go ahead, did a lot of other people come up and say, "Boy, this is really good wine. Where did this come from?" Or did other people come along and say, "Where did all that wine come from that's out there? 150 gallons of wine that's out there." Just put it in everyday language. I expect somebody noticed that, didn't they? In other words, people had been going by and been washing their hands in these 150 gallons here, and now it's the best wine in the country. Where'd this come from? What happened? Hey, and call the guys that's in charge of putting water in there. What happened? Why is there wine in here? I don't know. I don't know. That guy by the name of Jesus, he just told us to fill it up and then take it in to drink. In other words, I don't know what happened. And the Bible just stops right there. But when you stop to think in just normal circumstances, there had to be a lot of activity going on, a lot of questions that were taking place. So, again, the Bible giving us a very brief account of these things, but it does say this that gives us some information. In verse 11, this beginning of his signs did Jesus in Cana. That means this is the first miracle that he did in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed on him. So it manifested or made known his glory. It glorified Jesus. It made people look at Jesus as some great, great individual. So that was the impact that it had, that he is some great individual. Then it says, and his disciples believed on him. Now I want you to keep that hidden back there somewhere in your mind. And his disciples believed on him. How much did they believe on him? We all know that you can look in the Bible and you find that there are various degrees of belief or faith. How much did they believe? When they saw this, did they just absolutely believe, this man is the Son of God and I'll die for him? No. Because they go on out and then they call him in question. So what we're going to see is Jesus had these men to follow him around for either 2.5 or 3.5 years. And all during this time, this faith is being developed in the disciples. This faith is growing. It's growing. It's growing. It's growing. The faith is growing all the way down. And really, when you come down to it, it appears that the disciples didn't have that total, absolute faith until Jesus raised from the dead. When he finally raised from the dead, that's the time when they put it together and they knew this is the Son of God. Now that's not shocking We'll even see Jesus talking about that, because that is the one miracle that Jesus gave that proved to the people beyond any shadow of a doubt that he was the Son of God. But at any rate, this is the first miracle that Jesus did while he was here, and it called attention to all of these people who were there. So now, we go from there, and so they decide to leave Nazareth and go down to Capernaum. Now, Capernaum is up there at the north end of the Sea of Galilee. And these are going to be your two major cities as far as Jesus is concerned in spending his life up in the Galilean section. Now, up here is where his home is. This is where he lived. He's getting ready to go down to Capernaum. He'll go back to Nazareth, but only briefly. But he's going to now start making his headquarters, his permanent abode, down here in Capernaum. So at this time, I want us to kind of put this together and see just a little bit of geography so we can visualize these things. Now, I want you to notice that I've taken that crooked line and taken it down, and in other words, here's the way Jesus went. And you might ask, why didn't he just go straight across over to Capernaum? Why did I put that line that was down there? Well, if you look down at that little inset down there at the bottom, that's an actual picture of the land around Nazareth. That's what those mountains look like up there. So somewhere up there in these rugged mountains is Nazareth, and you have to walk out of these rugged mountains to get down to the Sea of Galilee. So you say, well, now I see why. You're going to have to just take the path of least resistance. You're going to have to go down, even go out of your way, but you don't just go across this kind of stuff. So these mountains are rugged mountains, and that's the kind of land that Nazareth is in. So they would come down, and then they would go up around the Sea of Galilee and come to Capernaum. Here's a good way, I think, for us to look at it. Up here we have Mount Hermon. Now, Mount Hermon is the only snow-covered mountain that stays that way the year round. And so up there it is, and the Jordan River begins up in Mount Hermon, just like the Skycomish River or the Snohomish River, any rivers here. They all began up in the Cascade Mountains with the runoff and the snow. And they come down, by the time they get down here, they're a big river. All right, up at Mount Hermon, there's a river, and it starts running down. And it gets down to the Sea of Galilee, and it runs through the Sea of Galilee, comes out the other side, and that river is known as the Jordan River. Now, it's known as the Jordan River after it comes out of the Sea of Galilee and before it goes into the Sea of Galilee. The whole thing is known as the Jordan River. But when we talk about the Jordan River, we don't think about the north end, we think about the south end, as we can see, and there's a good reason for that. And that is that down there, the activity around the Jordan in the New Testament, where Jesus and his disciples are concerned, it all revolves around the river as it comes out of that area that is down there. So now, in addition to this, here's where we have Capernaum. Up here's where you have another major city, Dan. And then we have another city, Caesarea Philippi. So we can see where Caesarea Philippi is. It's right up there at the base of that. Now, over on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, I put over there that white covering, and it's called the Decapolis. As you're reading about it in Jesus' days, they'll say, and the Decapolis. That belonged to the Romans or the Gentiles. Now, Decapolis, Deca means 10, Polis means city, so it means 10 cities. So there were 10 cities of Gentiles that were over there. Over there is where the pigs ran down and ran into the sea. Of course, Jews wouldn't be keeping swine, but Romans and Gentiles would. And so there were 10 cities that's over there. Now, for guys like Roger, who's been over there, he's probably going to say, well, down here south of there, there's a place called Beth Shan, and it's a Gentile city. Yeah, it was one of the 10, but they counted it over there on that. They just kind of lumped it in together is what they did, Roger. So there's that's it. So now I want you to see this. This is all I want you to see. As you're reading your New Testament, you're not going to read much about Jesus or any Jew going over on that side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, Jesus goes over there one time, and those guys come out. You remember that had those legions of demons out of the graveyard, and he healed them, and then they went into the swine, and the swine went down. That's Gentile country that is over there. So that means over here, if a Jew wanted to go somewhere, he walked on this side of the Sea of Galilee. So when you hear about Jesus going or coming or whatever it is, well, you'll find this is the side of the Sea of Galilee that the Jews had any activity in. Now, it's an interesting thing when you look at it. Here's a cutaway. And if you'll notice up there at the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River runs down to the Dead Sea. And you can see there's a great chasm there. And it's a real deep chasm that they call a rift. And it runs for hundreds of miles, really. And so it goes, and it's real deep. And finally, the Dead Sea down there is the lowest place on earth. It's some 1,300 feet below sea level, whereas the Death Valley here is about 300 feet. There's some places, but this one was way, way down there in that Jordan River. So as we see Jesus' activity now, I'm just trying to set it up here for us to see certain things. Here's a picture of the Jordan River. Just a picture's taken. You see it's not a big, massive river like we have here. It's a muddy river. It's not a clear, beautiful river like we have. Here's about the widest place there is in the Jordan River. It's most of the places is a lot smaller than that in there. But now, as they leave in verse 12, we're getting ready to pick up our story. They leave to go to Jerusalem. Now, they're going to go around that way, around that side of the Sea of Galilee, and they're going to go down to Jerusalem. But it's not that simple, really, when you look at it and you see it in the life of Jesus. Going to Jerusalem could be a real problem. Now, here's the problem. Up here, you have the land of Galilee. Down there, you have the land of Judea. We talk about that a whole lot. And Jesus spent most of his time up in Galilee, but he spent a lot of his time down in Judea. And even back in our introduction, when we were talking about it, we learned that Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell about the stories about Jesus up in Galilee. But John is going to tell us about the stories about him down in Judea. But be that as it may, here you have the country broken up. But right in the middle, there is the country of Samaria. Now, Samaria is an odd country. It's easy for you and me today to just say Galilee, Samaria, and Judea or something. But back in those days, it was a big mess. Now, in Luke chapter 9, verse 54, we read, "But they did not receive him, the Samaritans, because his face was set for the journey to Jerusalem." Now, when he left Galilee, was headed down to Jerusalem, the Samaritans wouldn't let him pass through their country because he was going down to Jerusalem. They hated Jerusalem. There's a big rift. If you're going down to Jerusalem, you can't come through. If you're leaving Jerusalem and going to Galilee and leaving Jerusalem, they'll let you pass through. It'd kind of be like if we want to go to California. But Oregon hates California. And Oregon will not let you go through if you're traveling south. Now, if you're traveling north, they'll let you go through. So then today, we'd have to find another way around Oregon in order to get down there. That's the predicament they have. Now, the reason for that is, in Galilee, they had Jews. In Judea, they had Jews. Now, they had two levels of Jews. A little while ago, I was asking Nancy what part of Indiana she's from. I thought she was down just across the river from where I live, down where the poor people live. But she said, oh, no, said I'm about, I don't know, several hundred, 150 miles or something north up there where the rich people live. And so she's on up more in the Chicago, high-hatty, snooty area, and I'm down in this old, poor country area. Now, you had two kinds of Jews. Down in Jerusalem, you had the political Jews, the Sadducees, what would you say about them? The haughty people, the politicians, the rulers, the high priests. But up in Galilee, you had the old, hard-working, blue-collar countrymen who did the fighting. They were fighters. They would fight the Romans. You didn't fool around with the Galileans. They were a different breed of Jews. Now, right in the middle there's Samaria. Samaria was composed of half Jew and half Assyrian. When Nebuchadnezzar came down and conquered Israel, and that's what Samaria used to be, the land of Israel, took them up, he then sent some Assyrians, Babylonian type people, down to mix with the old Jews that were left over, and they inhabited the land of Samaria, and they be called known as the Samaritans. So in Jesus' day, they were part Jew, but mostly had their sympathies with Assyria. And so they had their own religion, part Jew, part Assyrian. And so they hated the Jews. So as a result, if you wanted to go down through there, you would have problems in getting down there. So now they had another way. They would often go down, cross over this big chasm, down to Jericho, and then go up to Jerusalem. So they had these two routes that they would go. On this map that we've got, here's the way it would look that is in there. It would be that they would come down and go through like this. Maybe they could get that way, but if they went around here, they came down, and they come down to Jericho, and then from Jericho up to Jerusalem was a unique road. That's the road that you read about when you talk about the Good Samaritan, where he was hijacked. Here is a picture of that road. That road from Jericho to Jerusalem looks like this. You see a picture of it. It goes up and it goes around. 19 miles of just going through this kind of country. Just, when we were over there, bus driver would put her down in second or third and grind the engine. You wonder when it was going to overheat to get on up to Jerusalem. Now, from Jericho to Jerusalem is about the height from Monroe to Stevens Pass. Now, we take 50 miles to go around to get up that high. Can you imagine if you went up that high in 19 miles? So you're going around and around in that old desert country that is around there like that. So these Jews, when you read Jesus going to Jerusalem, it was quite a trip that is in there. But Jesus now is getting ready to go to attend his first Passover. And that's where we'll pick up our story next week.